Welcome back to Issues and Interviews with Kieran Michael Lalor on the Hudson Power Broker YouTube channel. Big show today. Welcome back. I hope you're watching all of our great videos, both Issues and Interviews, my show, and Politics with Powers, the show of Andy Powers. Nobody's giving you right of center, conservative style content focused on the Hudson Valley here in New York State, but we are. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. It takes about 1.5 seconds. You'll be glad you did, and you'll be supporting the only local right of center political news coverage in the Hudson Valley. And big news today out of Albany, the swamp of Albany. You know, I once said in the Poughkeepsie Journal, I think it was quoted that the Washington D.C. swamp looks like a dewy meadow compared to the swamp of Albany, and that is very true. And one thing that came out of Albany in the past couple of days, the highest law enforcement officer in the state, Letitia James, our attorney general, she was elected in 2018. She came out and said there's mismanagement in the National Rifle Association, the NRA, a group that's been around since the 1800s. I think it's 149 years old. It's got 5 million members. And she came out and said there's abuse at the top of the organization. They're looting the assets of the organization. They're not for profit, but the big shots in the organization, in the NRA, are treating the money as if it's their own. They're flying on private jets. They're getting private golf club memberships. All bad stuff. If that's true, that's bad stuff. And those people who are abusing the organization and abusing the members' money, they should be punished. And if Letitia James stopped right there, if that was her goal, was to punish the wrongdoers in the NRA, I'd say, good, go for it. I don't want the money of Second Amendment supporters and people who want to protect their Second Amendment wasted by, big shots in the organization. But she didn't stop there. She went a huge, very destructive step further. She wants to dissolve the NRA. She says that the NRA is so fraught with fraud and abuse that it should be dissolved. Eliminate this organization that's been around for 149 years, that has 5 million members. She thinks the solution is to eliminate it because it's so, quote, fraught with fraud and abuse. And that was interesting to me, thinking about the Albany swamp, thinking about how things run in Albany. Couldn't the very same argument be made about New York State government? Isn't it so fraught with fraud and abuse that maybe we should dissolve it and start it all over? Think about it. Think about what goes on in Albany. First of all, every year we negotiate in secret with 3 people, really, a $180 billion budget. So we tax people $180 billion in the state, and then we decide how to spend it in secret. I'm an elected official. I represent 135,000 people. I'm not in that room. The other 149 members of the assembly aren't in that room. Only one of the 67 members of the Senate are in that room, and they're spending this money. That sounds like abuse. That sounds like there's at least the potential for fraud. And think about this. We passed that budget. We passed important pieces of legislation, for example, legislation that expanded the governor's power in the middle of the night with no oversight. Is that fraught with fraud and abuse? I think it is. Basically, with that Governor Cuomo power bill, people wanted $40 million to spend on COVID, and Cuomo made a corrupt deal where he said, if you want me to sign off on that funding to fight this pandemic, you have to also give me expanded powers. That sounds fraught with fraud and abuse. Boy, it makes whatever the people at the NRA might have done seem like small potatoes. And think about this. I've only been in the assembly 7.5 years. In the first 3 or 4 years, both the leader of the assembly, Speaker Sheldon Silver, was indicted. He's been convicted twice. He finally went to jail last month. After a whole bunch of appeals and abuse of the system. But one of those 3 people in the room, Silver, negotiated budgets, was in power for 20 years. You could argue he was the most powerful person. He was corrupt. He was abusing his office for his own private gain. And then the next year, the Republican, Silver was a Democrat, the Republican leader of the Senate, Dean Skelos, exact same thing, was abusing the office to make money for himself and his family. That sounds fraught with fraud and abuse. And by the way, those guys, Skelos and Silver, they went to criminal trials. They were convicted in a criminal trial. Letitia James is only bringing civil charges against the leadership of the NRA. She's not seeking criminal charges. So it seems to me, since there's no criminal charges in the NRA case, what Silver and Skelos did is worse because they got convicted of crimes. They're both in jail right now. They've been in jail. I think Skelos might have gotten out because of the pandemic. I can't keep up with it all. But it seems like what they would have done is worse. But we don't try to dissolve the New York State legislature. And, the way that Silver and Skelos were ultimately brought down, Cuomo started a Anti-Corruption Commission. He was going to root out corruption in Albany. And then it started getting close to his friends like Silver and Skelos and even some people in the executive branch. And maybe even Cuomo himself. We'll never know. You know why? Because Cuomo corrupted his own anti-corruption commission. He shut it down. The only reason Silver and Skelos were brought to justice was because the U.S. attorney, unrelated to the state government, the federal U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, at the time, Preet Bharara, came in and said, you know what, I'll take those files and we'll see what we have here. And that's how you ultimately got the prosecution of Silver and Skelos. But it wasn't just the legislative branch. Cuomo's best friend, the guy that he said was the third Cuomo brother, Chris, Andrew, and then this third Cuomo brother who was at Mario Cuomo's funeral. Andrew said he was like a third son to Mario. Joe Percoco, as if that's not a perfect name for this one. Joe Percoco was abusing his relationship and his government position to make money for him and his wife, and he was convicted and went to jail. He was even caught on wiretaps referring to the graft, the thousands of dollars they were basically skimming off the top and getting bribes from people who wanted to do business with the state. He referred to it as boxes of ziti. Boxes of ziti, Paulie Walnuts and Tony Soprano style. That's a phrase from the Sopranos. So that sounds fraught with fraud and abuse in New York State government. But Letitia James is part of that. And most of those people, Sheldon Silver was an ally of hers. Andrew Cuomo, big part of the reason that Letitia James won the primary, Democrat primary in 2018 was she had the support of Andrew Cuomo. But I don't see her looking at any of this. And what's going on in New York State in terms of dollars, in terms of criminality, way worse than anything that's alleged in the NRA situation. And like I said, be very clear. I want to be very clear. I'm going to do my Obama. Let me be perfectly clear. If these guys are abusing NRA money for themselves, it sounds like that's a real possibility. They should be gone. They should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But that doesn't mean you should dissolve an organization. Just think about it. What Letitia James is saying is, hey, these guys are wasting the members' money. Those 5 million members, they pay $50 every year, and their money's being wasted. That's wrong, and I agree with that. And you know what? We're going to punish these wrongdoers, put them out of office, maybe make them pay back some of the money, but then they're going to dissolve the organization. They're going to punish the members by taking away their First Amendment right to associate with an organization and the people they want to, and take away their organization. How does that help the people? It's like she's burning down the village to save the village, so to speak. And the timing is interesting to me. You know, where are we? We're less than 100 days from the biggest election. I'm 40 years old. And I know everybody likes to say, oh, this is the biggest election of our lifetime. And when they say that, it usually isn't. The current election always seems like a big one, but I think this is a pretty big one. You know, the direction that Trump would take this country into the future, and Joe Biden, if he can last for half a term or a term, and that administration, and how people might take advantage of Joe Biden's whatever his mental situation is and his lack of energy is, those are two starkly different directions. So here we have a political organization. Democrats make the NRA seem like it's all powerful. It's not all powerful, but it is a very influential organization year-round, especially at election time. And here we are, less than 100 days from an election. The senior law enforcement official in New York State wants to dissolve a political organization. By the way, a political organization made up of political opponents of Letitia James and her opponents. That doesn't sound very democratic. That doesn't sound democratic at all, to try to eliminate your political opposition through the courts. In fact, that's the opposite of democratic. That's the opposite of our system. But that's what's going on here if you look at the timing. Oh, and by the way, came out since this lawsuit, but Letitia James, when she was running in 2008, did an interview, I think it was for Ebony Magazine. She referred to the NRA, which has 5 million hardworking Americans as members. It's been around for 150 years. It's the number one organization that stands up for our Second Amendment right to bear arms. Referred to it as a criminal enterprise, and get this, a terrorist organization. So maybe Letitia James, after calling this a criminal enterprise, calling the NRA a criminal enterprise, and calling it a terrorist organization, that's a little hyperbolic, don't you think? That's a little outrageous. Maybe she's not the right person to bring these charges against the leadership of the NRA. Whatever the merits, she is a bad messenger. She's hopelessly conflicted on this. She's probably not the right person to be bringing this lawsuit. And I remember very clearly the debates on the SAFE Act. It was my first day in the assembly. The SAFE Act was a big Cuomo anti-Second Amendment piece of legislation. It did so much for gun violence. You know, all you have to do is read the papers every day, and you see more and more gun violence in the state, despite the great SAFE Act from almost 8 years ago. But I remember those debates. And the sponsor of the SAFE Act, a draconian anti-Second Amendment piece of legislation that passed in New York, the sponsor of that bill in the assembly said during the debate, I don't know why you guys are so upset about the SAFE Act. Our original position was confiscation. We wanted to confiscate people's firearms. We're going to confiscate certain firearms. So you should be happy that we're giving you the SAFE Act. And the only reason they had to give the SAFE Act and didn't go with confiscation was because, remember Dean Skelos, who I mentioned, well, before he was indicted and convicted for abusing his office, he was one of the 3 people in the room. He was one of the big negotiators, and he said, I'll go with the SAFE Act, even though it violates the Second Amendment, but I can't go for confiscation. So they had to compromise to get his vote and get him to bring it to the Senate floor and get the mushy Senate Republicans from Long Island to go along with it. So even that was a corrupt deal. So they wanted confiscation. And the other thing that came up over and over during that debate over the SAFE Act and any other Second Amendment legislation was, hey, you don't need a firearm. We have the police. They're right around the corner. They'll come and protect you, which was not a good argument then. It's not what the Second Amendment is all about. But it was the argument that they made. Now you fast forward, the same people who want to take away your Second Amendment rights and used to tell you you don't need a robust Second Amendment. You just need a little, maybe you need a hunting rifle to go hunting. That's all you really need, because the police are right around the corner if anything really starts to threaten you, if you have any problems. Well, now they're the same people who are saying defund the police, disband the police, disband prison. So they want to disarm you, and then they want to take away the law enforcement officers that might add an additional layer of protection to public safety. So very scary stuff. They're going after the Second Amendment, as always, by trying to dissolve a Second Amendment group, the number one, largest, oldest, probably the most affected Second Amendment group in the country. And they're going after First Amendment rights by telling people you can't be a part of this organization because the leaders abuse the trust. And by the way, how did the Clinton Foundation work out? Boy, the Clintons live a nice lifestyle. They had nothing when they left office in 2000. Hillary was a senator, and Bill basically oversaw these charities, and they live a nice lifestyle. Their net worth is in the hundreds of millions. They hang out with all the big shots. They start a company that I don't know about. Did they start something really big? Yeah, they started the Clinton Foundation, a charity which employs all their political hangers-on. Before Hillary ran for president, she had all her aides employed and kept them all intact with the Clinton Foundation. She was getting donations from Saudi Arabia and Russia and all these countries while she was the Secretary of State, and while some people thought she was going to be president, and it was fueling her lifestyle, whether they took the money as income or they just flew around on the private jets and it paid for their luxurious lifestyle. Boy, that sounds fraught with fraud and corruption also, just like the allegations against the NRA. But I haven't seen the big investigation. And also, how about the National Action Network? Al Sharpton lives a nice lifestyle. I'm not a cigar guy. I really don't like fancy places. But twice in my life, friends have brought me to the Havana Cigar Room in Manhattan, kind of a fancy place. Not my kind of place, but friends of mine brought me there. And both times, I'm riding up on the elevator, and my friend said, every time I've been here, I've seen Al Sharpton hanging out here with all the rich guys. And I get out of the elevator, and who's sitting there? Both times that I was there, sitting there with a bunch of pretty ladies, Al Sharpton, hanging out with all the rich folks. I don't know how he could afford a membership to that. I know I certainly couldn't afford it. Most people I know couldn't afford it, except for those couple of friends. But he lived a really nice lifestyle, and his occupation is his charity, his National Action Network. So I'd like to see if there's any fraud and corruption permeating throughout that organization, but I don't think Letitia James is going to do that. And I'll add a third example. The minority caucus in the New York State legislature, they have a scholarship, and they raise a whole bunch of money from lobbyists, and they have a big dinner, and they take all this money. They don't give out any scholarships. They haven't given out any scholarships, and nobody can explain why. And I don't hear Letitia James barking up that tree either. So very interesting that her political foes and her political adversaries 100 days before the biggest election of most of our lifetimes, they need to be dissolved. But these other organizations, yeah, no problems there. Nothing to see there. But I'm a positive guy. I'm an optimist. I actually think the bright silver lining of all this is going to help Trump. This kind of stuff is going to help Trump because it shows New Yorkers and it shows the American people that the left, Democrats in position of powers, want to take away your Second Amendment rights. They don't care if they have to destroy your First Amendment, freedom of association rights. If that's what they have to do to keep and hold power and rule over you, that's exactly what they're going to do. Second Amendment and regular people, believers in the Second Amendment and regular people are voting with their feet and their dollars. Gun sales are up through the roof where I live. If you drive by one of the local gun shops, it could be pouring rain out. There's still literally a line out the door, people waiting in line in the rain to make sure that they have firearms that they need to protect themselves and their families and make sure that they're safe. So the more they come after the Second Amendment, the more they try to attack our Second Amendment rights and our Bill of Rights and constitutional rights generally, usually backfires on them. I think it's going to help Republicans. I think it's going to help President Trump in November. And by the way, I made a nice purchase over the weekend. Very happy with it. I think you're going to like it. Let's see. Trump 2020. Keep America great again. That looks good. That looks good. If you want to see more videos of me with the hat, without the hat, go to Hudson Power Broker YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button. Watch all of our awesome content. Watch Politics with Powers. She comes out with a new episode every week. I'm on at least twice a week. So make sure you subscribe to Hudson Power Broker YouTube channel and check out all our videos on HudsonPowerBroker.com. We're going to have more original content up there very soon. We're going to go back to our original mission of aggregating political news in the Hudson Valley. HudsonPowerBroker.com. Check it out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Hudson Power Broker, and be back next time for Issues and Interviews with Kieran Michael Lalor. Maybe I'll have a different hat on. Thanks for joining us.